Lovely to see our audience file in. I will kick us off. Welcome everyone to Ammonia Energy Live, where we explore the wonderful world of ammonia energy and the role it's going to play in global decarbonisation with an Australian twist. First, I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today. I'm on Wurundjeri country in Melbourne, and I pay respects to elders past and present. And I extend my acknowledgement out to country wherever you're dialing in from in Australia today, and indeed around the world. So this episode, we start out with a story. In November last year, we heard from Incitec Pivot Limited that their Gibson Island plant in Brisbane would cease conventional ammonia production at the close of 2022. But that announcement was soon followed by a possible lifeline, with a feasibility study launched to investigate green ammonia production via electrolytic hydrogen. Happily, feasibility study partner Fortescue Future Industries gave the tick of approval to the technical feasibility side in mid-December last year. So now the hard work really begins. Can the Gibson Island plant be successfully converted? What are the key considerations to work through? What does the pathway look like? And can this goal be reached? So to answer all these questions today, we're joined by Darren Jarvis, Vice President of Strategic Project Development at Incitec Pivot Limited. Darren is based in Melbourne, and he has 25 years experience in the chemical manufacturing industry. In 2019, he was responsible for the ARENA-funded feasibility assessment of green ammonia manufacturing at the Dyno Nobel Moranbah facility in Queensland. So he knows a thing or two on this subject. You've seen Darren before as the interviewer on Ammonia Energy Live, and now we get to turn the microphone around and draw on his wealth of experience. So welcome, Darren. Joining me to interview Darren is another familiar face, Andrew Dickson, who's the Development Director at CWP Global. Please submit your questions via the Q&A function you see at the bottom of your screen. You can upvote and comment on each other's questions if you wish. We've got a number of great pre-submitted questions lined up for our Q&A, and I encourage you to keep on doing that when you register to submit your questions for our speaker. We'll also put a recording of this episode up on our YouTube channel ASAP. So let's get into it. So, hi Darren, great to have you here. We've heard from you many times before, but I don't think we've ever had a proper introduction. So can you share more about yourself and when you had your first light bulb moment about ammonia energy?
Well, thanks, Julian. It's great to be here, if a bit weird to be on the other side of the conversation. I'd also like to start by acknowledging the Wurundjeri people, the traditional custodians of the land on which I present today, and I pay my respects to their elders past and present, and extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples who are watching today. I like to joke that I'm still in my first job since I joined what was then ICI Australia as an engineer straight out of university in 1997, and I've stayed here ever since, through the change to Orica in 2000 and the spin-off of Incitec Pivot in 2006. So in my time at IPL and preceding companies, I've had a pretty wide range of roles, mostly related to heavy chemical manufacturing, doing operations, maintenance, reliability, and particular projects. I headed the strategic engineering function for IPL in Australia for 5 years before moving into my current role in our group strategy team in 2019. My light bulb moment came actually back in 2018 when I was developing the decarbonisation strategy for IPL. In that process, I identified that more than 2/3 of our entire business's total greenhouse gas emissions were coming from the manufacture of ammonia. And as I sought to understand the technologies that could be deployed to decarbonise that manufacturing, I discovered that ammonia was the only technologically ready path to export clean hydrogen. So with the CSIRO's work showing a clear opportunity for Australia to become a clean hydrogen superpower, I suddenly saw the huge blue sky opportunity for ammonia energy in Australia.
Good to hear your light bulb moment, Darren. I hadn't heard that before, and we've all had them. So this is a pretty special episode for Ammonia Energy Live. We've never had an ammonia producer present here before, to my knowledge. Can you tell us a bit more about Incitec Pivot's ammonia footprint in Australia and its, your decarbonisation goals, particularly for ammonia production moving forwards?
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. So IPL actually has 6 ammonia manufacturing plants globally. We've got 3 here in Australia, in Queensland, and 3 in the United States of America. We also have a joint venture with Wesfarmers in the Queensland Nitrates facility, also in Queensland. Our facilities in Queensland include our 1 million tonne per annum ammonium phosphate fertiliser plant at Phosphate Hill, our 350,000 tonne per annum Moranbah ammonium nitrate plant, which makes explosives for the mining industry, and of course our Gibson Island facility, where we currently make ammonia, urea, AdBlue and sulphate of ammonia for both agricultural and industrial uses. Currently, the vast majority of our products are sold and used domestically. However, about half of our fertiliser from Phosphate Hill is exported because of the seasonal demand profile for phosphate fertilisers. Our total ammonia capacity in Queensland is about 700,000 tonnes per annum, and our ammonia plants here emit about 1.2 million tonnes of CO2 each year. So IPL's announced a short-term target of a 5% reduction in absolute emissions across the group by 2025 and a 25% reduction by 2030, with our ambition to achieve net zero by 2050. Achieving our 2030 target will force us, or will require us, to reduce the emissions from our ammonia plants. And we've been, I think, pretty proactive in looking for opportunities to accelerate the transition to low carbon ammonia production. We're investigating all options for this, including green hydrogen feedstock options, carbon capture and storage, carbon capture utilisation options, and also methane pyrolysis, even as a perhaps even harder idea.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Darren. So on to the topic at hand, the possibility of renewable ammonia from EU Gibson Island plant in Brisbane. So how do we get to this point? You could give us a quick recap.
Well, Julian, this project goes way back to 2020. So IPL has been pretty public about the challenges we've faced in securing an economic supply of gas for our Gibson Island facility for the last 5 years. Following the study we completed with ARENA support in 2019 on the feasibility of green ammonia production at our Moranbah plant, I applied the same thinking to Gibson Island. If gas wasn't going to be available, what would it take to convert the facility to use a green hydrogen feedstock? With the nascent state of green hydrogen and green ammonia industry and the scale of investment required, it was, if not immediately, very quickly apparent that we would need partners to pull the project off. So we developed a project concept, what I believe is the best near-term green ammonia project in Australia, and then engaged with a number of potential partners seeking the capability and commitment to do the project that would be a fit with our own. In July last year, we engaged Ammonia Casale to complete a feasibility study into the inside battery limit conversion of the facility, with Oricon to support the evaluation of the outside battery limit feasibility. We chose Ammonia Casale because we think they're the world leader in ammonia plant conversions and upgrades, and we've also got a long history with Casale, and they designed our previous upgrade at Gibson Island in 2007. Then in October, we signed a memorandum of understanding with Fortescue Future Industries to jointly investigate the full project feasibility. We chose FFI because of their clear commitment to accelerating the development of green ammonia, coupled with the economic strength that's provided by their parent company, Fortescue Metals Group. In December, we jointly announced that the studies had confirmed the technical feasibility of the plant conversion, and we've now moved into development of the next phase of the project, which is front-end engineering design, or FEED. We've since engaged Casale to complete the basic design for the core ammonia plant, and we're working hard on all of the other contracts for all the other major project elements, including our overarching agreement with FFI. So hold on and expect some more announcements in the next few months.
Very interesting. We look forward to those future announcements. So what about all the existing infrastructure and equipment at Gibson Island? So basically, what changes and what stays the same? Thanks,
Andrew. Look, at the highest level, not that much changes. Today, we manufacture about 300,000 tonnes of ammonia per year. And after the conversion, we're still going to manufacture about 300,000 tonnes of ammonia per year, unless we want to take the opportunity to do both the conversion and an upgrade. We still make ammonia using the Haber Bosch synthesis process, where hydrogen and nitrogen are combined in a 3-to-1 ratio at high pressure in the presence of an iron catalyst. In fact, we'll be keeping almost all of the equipment in our ammonia synthesis section, the back end of our ammonia plant. However, the way we make the inputs to the synthesis plant, that's a terrible word to say repeatedly, changes a lot. Currently, with a conventional steam methane reforming process, we use natural gas as a feedstock for hydrogen production, but also as a fuel for the high temperature heat that's required to crack the methane molecule. All of that heat has to go somewhere, and much of the equipment in the SMR front end, or steam methane reforming front end, is dedicated to recovering that heat and using it to generate steam to run compressors and pumps that we use elsewhere in the process. With the green hydrogen process proposed by FFI, the hydrogen is produced from water electrolysis and will be supplied directly to the syn loop at high purity and ambient temperature. This means that the existing front end is fully redundant, and also that all of the equipment that currently relies on steam generated in the front end must be redesigned to use green electricity instead. Now, with modern high efficiency motors and variable speed drives, we can achieve that, and this conversion also provides some energy efficiency benefits as well. But another major change is in the production of nitrogen. With our existing plant, nitrogen is produced directly in the reforming section when the oxygen in the air is burnt off to produce CO2, or it produces CO2. Because that combustion no longer occurs in our green ammonia plant, we need to build a new air separation unit that uses cryogenic refrigeration to separate nitrogen from the air. This is quite energy intensive, and it will increase the consumption of electricity. But this power consumption change is a pretty small proportion of the total electricity required due to the large amounts of power that are used to convert water to hydrogen and oxygen in the electrolysis process. One of the best parts about using an existing ammonia plant is that there are existing utilities already in place. The provision of utilities form up to about 30% of a new project development and include compressed air, fire water, towns water, cooling water, deam-in water, wastewater. Our consumption of these utilities will change due to a lot less steam and cooling required. However, we're going to retain almost all of our existing utilities. In particular, we recently secured a long-term supply of recycled water from Queensland Urban Utilities, which will underpin the sustainable operation of both the hydrogen and the ammonia production at the site. And a final major change to the site will be the installation of additional ammonia storage that is required to facilitate the export scale shipments from the site. While we already export ammonia from Gibson Island, this is limited by the size of our existing ammonia tank, and it's not economic for long-term shipments and a larger scale operation.
Well, that's fantastic. I don't think we've ever had a brick by brick breakdown of all those components before, so that's fantastic. So what's the big vision for a few years' time?
As the best near-term Australian green ammonia opportunity, both FFI and IPL have an ambitious target for our Gibson Island project. We're seeking to be producing green ammonia in 2024. To achieve this, we need to complete the FEED study this year, including commitment to some of our long lead items, and we intend to make FID late this year, early next year, and immediately roll into construction following the cessation of gas-backed manufacturing. We'll be demolishing our ammonia front end and urea plant as they'll be redundant, with ammonia produced and exported directly from our dedicated berth. And in a few years' time, I expect GI to be operating flat out, supplying green ammonia to FFI and other customers who have a commitment to decarbonise their energy imports. I also expect numerous other green ammonia projects to be coming online as the long pipeline of projects in development are made bankable by the work that we complete and share from our Gibson Island project.
Darren, you mentioned just before that part of this journey involves ceasing urea production. Can I ask you to sort of explain more about that and if there's a possibility for green urea production here or elsewhere?
Yeah, that's a great question, Andrew, and one that many people don't appreciate when considering how to decarbonise the fertiliser industry. Urea is made by combining ammonia and high purity CO2 in a reactor at extremely high pressure. CO2 is an essential feedstock for the production of urea. Hence, if you move to a green hydrogen feedstock, you no longer have a CO2 necessary to make it. Now, urea has the highest nitrogen content of any solid fertiliser and is by far the most popular nitrogen fertiliser for agriculture. Nitrogen fertilisers are required to sustain high crop yields and are widely credited with sustaining more than half the people on the planet. So looking forward to a decarbonised future means finding a way to replace urea or manufacture green urea from clean hydrogen and recovered or recycled CO2. Now, I call this the holy grail of fertiliser decarbonisation, since displacing the grey product currently made requires economically producing both green ammonia and low-cost, pure recycled CO2. Now, that's going to require both technologies to be developed and come together at vast scale, since there's more than 180 million tonnes of urea produced annually, with global demand increasing pretty much with GDP every year.
Interesting, interesting. I would like to pick up on something that I've heard you say a couple of times before, and that Gibson Island is the best near-term green ammonia manufacturing opportunity in Australia. Why is that so? And it might be useful to outline for everyone, what are the basic things that a green ammonia plant needs?
Thanks, Julian. So when considering a green ammonia plant, to me, there's 4 basic prerequisites. You've got to have suitably zoned land to put it on. You've got to have access to a high voltage transmission network, or lots and lots of land to do it behind the meter. You've got to have access to a secure water supply, and you've got to have a shipping berth or access to an end market. So when I commenced evaluation of the Gibson Island site, I found that the site was ideally situated with sufficient existing vacant industrial land to site an electrolysis facility, access to the Transgrid network within 5 kilometres of the site, an existing recycled water supply, and a dedicated shipping berth that was suitable for ammonia shipping. Now, not just that, with an existing operating ammonia plant, we have a huge advantage over a greenfield development because we have existing social licence to operate. We've demonstrated safe ammonia production in the community for more than 50 years. And that's all before considering the cost saving you get from having an existing ammonia synthesis plant and utilities. My estimate is that the cost savings from a brownfield conversion versus a greenfield are up to $500 million, which is not small change for anybody.
Interesting. So, Darren, you've also announced a vision for Kooragang Island. Can you describe a bit more about that and where the ammonia would go, either for exports or for domestic markets?
Yeah, Andrew, our investigation of green ammonia with Keppel and Temasek is still ongoing, but clearly Singapore is a key market of interest as both a large energy importer and a key bunkering destination for global shipping. Now, given the scale of offtake required to underpin any large-scale greenfield green ammonia development, I expect that international export markets who are already setting targets for decarbonised energy imports are going to continue to be the primary customers. This is a potentially huge market. I've previously estimated that displacing just 10% of current global oil trade with ammonia would require more than 1 billion tonnes of green ammonia. That's about 7 times the current total capacity of all the ammonia plants in the world today.
Yeah, massive.
Yeah, that's a lot. I'm interested if you could explain a little bit more about what the barriers are for domestic demand for green ammonia. It doesn't sound like there's much interest in Australia currently.
Julian, the current market for Australian ammonia serves 2 primary sectors: agriculture through nitrogen fertilisers and mining through ammonium nitrate explosives. Now, both of those markets are commodity-based. They're export-driven, and they compete directly with international products that are primarily manufactured in jurisdictions without high carbon costs. The inputs, fertilisers and ammonium nitrate, are also traded commodities themselves, which can be imported into Australia with relatively low barriers to entry outside the current, excluding current market disruption, of course. The production of green ammonia is higher cost than grey ammonia, and assuming we get a return to normality in Europe, will continue to be so for many years. This means a price premium is required to invest the funds required to build the green ammonia production facilities and to operate them on an ongoing basis, to convert them from that, either build them as new plants or convert the existing grey plants. Now, currently the customer base doesn't have sufficient incentive to move to a low carbon input. Fertilisers and explosives are Scope 3 inputs to agricultural and mine commodities. The business case for Scope 3 reductions is harder than for Scope 1 and 2, and many organisations are focused on addressing their much larger downstream Scope 3 emissions rather than their upstream emissions. There's also a challenge that the price of reducing Scope 3 emissions via green ammonia can be higher than the price via other methodologies such as purchased offsets. A simple way to show this is to compare the energy cost that you have from making ammonia from natural gas, at say $5 a gigajoule, and green hydrogen at, say, $2 a kilogram. That difference is about $180 per tonne of ammonia. Now, each tonne of ammonia is made using SMR, or steam methane reforming, will emit about 1.8 tonnes of CO2. So the abatement cost, just for that change in energy, is $100 per tonne of CO2 equivalent. And that's before any capital recovery. While carbon abatement costs continue to be much lower than this, that's a hard sell. Now, obviously, much higher natural gas costs will make this easy. And energy parity comes at around maybe $10 a gigajoule if you're still getting your hydrogen at $2 a kilogram. But that gas pricing needs to be internationally competitive, i.e. gas costs would have to be at that level across many parts of the world. So this means that the alternative market for green ammonia is required, hence the opportunity as an energy source, where there is basically no better alternative source of zero emission chemical energy.
Very interesting. So clearly there's a lot of work to be done. Now, we've had a number of really good audience questions pre-submitted today. So we're going to draw on a couple of them now, starting with a question from Penelope from DFAT, who asks what the main barriers are for decarbonising your operations, and then expanding. You've already spoken about limited domestic markets, but what are some of the other barriers?
Oh, well, thanks, Penelope, for the question. And anybody who knows me knows I could bang on about this for hours, but perhaps I'll just keep it to a few dot points. Difficulty making a final investment decision on new plant investment because there's a mismatch between the upstream energy contracting and end customers who aren't signing up for long-term deals. So you can sign your power up for 10 or 15 or 20 years, but you can't sign your customers up for 20 years. There's a lack of power infrastructure. There's not enough existing electrical capacity to move the transmission capacity to move the required power you need for green ammonia at scale. There's high TUOS costs, and there's also expectations that because they're going to be large consumers, that the hydrogen industry can or will pay for transmission capacity expansion. And the economics make that extraordinarily challenging. Lack of CO2 infrastructure. Today, there's no access to CO2 pipelines that either can supply from blue ammonia or consume for clean urea. First mover disadvantage with expectations that the next project is going to be lower cost and that low carbon hydrogen and ammonia costs will drop significantly. Renewable energy costs that are significantly higher than key competitor countries such as the Middle East and Europe. Insufficient renewables firming capacity, making it difficult to get the capacity factors you need to support ammonia conversions. Lack of consistent international carbon pricing, lack of a clean hydrogen or ammonia certification system that allows fungible trading, which actually decouples the source of the production of the green ammonia certificate from the source of the supply of the product, which I think is critical to the opening the market and allowing more plants to be involved in the development of green ammonia. There's a grab bag for starters.
Thanks, Darren.
Okay, so that's just a small and easily surmountable list. That's good. That's good. Nick from Suez asks about the water consumption footprint of the new green ammonia facility and how it might compare to a grey.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Nicholas. Another fact that lots of people don't know is that the water consumption for a green ammonia plant is not materially different from that for a grey ammonia plant. And that's because the majority of the water consumed is actually for cooling purposes rather than what's consumed in the process. Now, noting in advance, I'm not a process engineer, but my understanding is that the pure D-min water that's required for electrolysis is not dramatically different to the pure water required for the SMR reaction. So it's in the order of 9 litres a kilogram for electrolysis and about 5 or 6 litres per kilogram for SMR. And the key point is that for both processes, that water is less than half of the total you need because the majority is actually evaporated in cooling towers to remove waste heat. And that goes to the overall efficiency of the electrolysis process and the reforming process. So we currently use at Gibson Island around 6 megalitres a day of recycled water, and we expect that overall consumption is not going to be dramatically different after the green conversion.
Okay, that's really interesting, and I won't let you go on that one just yet. What about a comment on Greenfield versus brownfield? it sounds like brownfield conversions is a good option in this space.
Yeah, Julian, as I noted before, the ammonia synthesis plant and utilities make up a sizable proportion of the total capital cost of a green ammonia plant. I've seen estimates where that's around or above 50% of the total project cost. So hence, any option where you can avoid this cost, or even a decent portion of this cost, is going to give you a significant economic advantage and lower your levelised cost of ammonia. Now, in an environment where it's extremely difficult to secure high offtake prices, I expect brownfield conversions to be advantaged over greenfield plants. Now, having said all that, the key challenge with brownfield conversions is that they are where they are. If they aren't located in a place with access to a market that you want to serve or near the infrastructure that you require, then all those advantages aren't worth very much. And of course, older plants have challenges around reliability and maintenance, and they can be more expensive to run. But the upfront differential, that has to be evaluated.
Now, Darren, we've had a question from Colin at Advotech on whether high oil and gas prices promote more capital investment in green projects. What do you think?
Yeah, thanks, Colin. Well, there's an old adage that the cure for high prices is high prices. And the current disruption to world natural gas and coal markets, it's definitely providing everyone with a new comparison point to think about when evaluating the economics of green ammonia production. Now, having said that, I think there's likely to be sort of transitional. While the massive inflation we've seen in energy is already flowing into commodities and has a real risk of flowing into wages. So my concern is that while we'll see the cost of developing renewable energy will also go up, and that may occur as we see fossil energy prices come back down. Now, I wish I could predict what's going to happen, but I won't pretend to have any better crystal ball than the next person. But yeah, there's certainly an uncertain period we're going through now, and I think it's going to persist for a few years yet.
So really, rising commodity prices have a much more complicated effect on us than we think.
Yeah, so Andrew, the supply chain disruptions are already being felt in every part of the cost stack. So not only are chemical feedstock costs much higher, but we're still yet to build everything we need if we're actually to supply green ammonia. The cost of plant, equipment, labour, everything we need to build these projects could and probably will go up a lot in the next few years. And we may continue to see supply chain disruptions which expose us all to even more inflation risk. Added to this will be the regulatory responses to the disruption we're seeing now, which will almost certainly create another set of market dislocations. What those will be is very difficult to predict.
Really interesting. We're certainly touching on so many of the really big questions in the hydrogen and ammonia space, which is great. This one is a more general question from Janet Keppel. How do we accelerate projects like this in Australia?
Yeah, thanks, John. My answer to this one is simple. We need more partners like Keppel and FFI who are aggressively pursuing and supporting development of green ammonia end markets and investing in upstream supply. And finally, to bang my very simple drum, fundamentally, we just have to have vast amounts of ultra low-cost renewable energy. To get this, we're going to need clear and supportive state and federal government policy, and importantly, access to debt at rates that are competitive with our international competitors in Europe and the Middle East. We're also going to need power transmission infrastructure that is built and ready before we try and take an FID on a large hydrogen project. It's a big challenge for us.
Excellent. Fantastic. Fantastic, Darren. Thank you so much for all that. I'm going to draw on some of the themes for the couple of audience questions that are coming through. Please, the people on the call, send through your questions via the Q&A function. Drawing on the first question, we've talked a bit about the capital costs and especially the savings you get from a brownfield plant where you don't have to rebuild all the ammonia synthesis stuff. What's the comparison of the capital cost for the new stuff you need? The electrolyzers, all the smart stuff, the energy efficient stuff. I wondered if you had a comment on that.
Look, the interesting question, Julian, I might ask you to clarify. The differential cost between a brownfield and a greenfield, the difference is what you don't have to buy. The new things that you buy to be very similar. If you're going to buy an ASU, it's going to be a similar ASU if it's a Greenfield or a brownfield plant. If you're going to buy a new switch station, a substation or switch gear, that's also going to be similar. I'm not sure if I've answered the question, but that would be my response.
I would draw on that a bit more and say, are those capital costs for the new plant, is that a significant chunk? Is that a significant concern?
Oh, look, it's all, building things is expensive. And the more you have to build, the bigger the cost is. I won't go into the details of what capital estimates are, but it's a non-trivial capital investment for sure. And the key difference is, if you're trying to build it all completely from scratch, that's an even bigger number. So a 400,000 tonne per annum green ammonia plant might be $1 billion. It's big money.
We've had a number of questions from Greg Stammis. I'll pick this one. So Greg asks, why is only about 10% of ammonia shipped internationally today? And do you see this percentage rising?
Yeah, great question, Greg. The primary reason that only 10% of ammonia is shipped, in my view, is there is a lot of captive consumption. So 80% of all ammonia that is manufactured goes into fertiliser. So whilst you see a relatively modest amount of ammonia shipment as ammonia, you see a lot of ammonia shipped as urea, you see a lot of ammonia shipped as ammonium nitrate, ammonium phosphate fertilisers. So we call the ammonia trade a merchant trade. So that's going to usually producers of those downstream products that aren't integrated. They're in countries where they don't have lots of gas or coal, where they can make their own ammonia. So they're buying that ammonia from elsewhere. And do we expect it to increase? Well, with an entirely new market as ammonia for energy, absolutely we expect it to increase. There are very large forecasts out there that might indicate that that traded ammonia market goes up by 5, 10, 15 times its current size. And as I mentioned earlier, if we believe that green ammonia is going to be the chemical energy for international energy trade of choice, you could be looking at a billion-tonne market or a multi-billion-tonne market. That's hundreds of times current scale.
That's the dream we're all chasing. And now another question from David Cullum. He asks, what kind of mechanisms or changes to traditional ammonia offtake contracts are required to enable green ammonia projects?
Great question. I'll take it off the cuff. Fundamentally, most ammonia is not currently contracted on term. It's a commodity product. Parties may have 1 year or 3, even perhaps maybe at the most a 3-year sort of offtake contract, but it is largely a spot market. Fundamentally, you can't make an effort. So it's extremely difficult, and you have to have a very high level of confidence to make an investment decision in a hundreds of millions, billions of dollars facility without some certainty or some confidence in what offtake price you're going to get, which requires a longer term engagement. And the other challenge, of course, is the willingness to pay question. What price will the market put on the low carbon nature of the ammonia produced? And if there has to be a recognition that low carbon ammonia is not the same as high carbon ammonia, and it will have a price differential.
So I guess there's a fair bit to learn, or look back to the start of the LNG industry several decades ago to see how this will move, into the future for all of us.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of parallels between the development of the nascent green hydrogen, green ammonia industry back to how LNG was founded, which obviously required a lot of downstream customer partnerships back into the supply chain.
And long-term offtake contracts to get projects built.
Correct.
Excellent. That's really interesting. I have a question, which has actually come up a couple of times recently for me. The feedstock hydrogen which goes into the Haber Bosch process, is there an engineering challenge for plugging green hydrogen electrolyzers into a traditional or conventional Haber Bosch setup? Is there some kind of is there some kind of step system that you need to do? in between?
Yeah, so the engineering challenges of taking hydrogen produced from electrolysis into an ammonia synthesis back end, as a Haber Bosch process, are not actually that complicated. The plus side of hydrogen production from water electrolysis is that the hydrogen is very pure. It has no sulfur or carbon contaminants, which can be a problem in in ammonia synthesis. But you do have oxygen and oxides and water, which do have to be removed. So the primary activity is to strip all the oxygen out. You need your oxygen to be at sort of maybe sub 10 part per million levels. And of course, you then need to get the hydrogen at a suitable pressure. So typically either on the downstream or the upstream side of the syngas compressors, so somewhere between 20 and 180 bar. But the other key integration challenge is actually intermittency. So synthesis plants have a limited amount of turn down, and brownfield synthesis plants have less turn down than new designed processes that are being developed by each of the major ammonia technology licenses now that give you more flexibility. But if you have an intermittent supply of renewable energy, that may allow you to operate your electrolyzer intermittently because they have very fast response times and they can be ramped up and down a long way. Ammonia plants don't like being ramped up and down very rapidly, and that can lead to certainly lower uptime performance and more wear and tear on equipment because you have large, high temperature, high speed rotating equipment. So that's really, I think, what most people are finding is the single biggest integration is you can solve for purity, you can get the right pressure, but getting the mix of power available at the right frequency and the requirement for hydrogen storage or some other means to maintain consistency in the synthesis operation.
Interesting. Thank you. Very, very informative. I do need to know that. And I'm sure some of our viewers do too. Do you have any more questions for Darren, Andrew? Or are you all good?
No, I'm all good. I think we're probably up against time, but it's been a really great session today. Thank you very much, Darren, on behalf of all of us.
You're going to let me off the rack now, guys?
I will. I will put a wrap on this episode of Ammonia Energy Live. Thank you very much to our live audience for coming along. Something new, in about 6 hours' time, our first ever Maritime Ammonia Insights webinar is going to screen from Europe. AEA Maritime directors Sophia and Connor Furstenberg-Stott will interview two big names from the ZEEDS consortium, Avidar Lundberg from Grieg Maritime and Christian Buet from Green Ammonia Boulevard. For our Australian viewers, tune in after dinner for some great discussion. How do we take advantage of the huge opportunity that's presented in maritime ammonia, and how do we accelerate the transition? Registration details will be in your inboxes ASAP. I'll also send through the details for next month's Ammonia Energy Live, and another brand new webinar series, Project Features, is also going to be released. So keep an eye out for news on those two. I can tell you our first episode of Project Features will feature Horizon Energy and the Clean Air Task Force. And we're going to look at the Barents Blue project in Norway. So thanks again to Darren for being our guest today. Thank you to Andrew for interviewing, and we will see you all next month on Ammonia Energy Live. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Julian. Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks, everyone.